Welcome to Maintaining a Balance video 8. In this video, we're going to be discussing donated and artificial blood. Since the introduction and discovery of blood groups, the cross-matching of blood groups has allowed blood donation to take place. Previously, people were becoming sick and quite unwell when they received donated blood. Improvement in blood donation technology and the ability to increase the shelf life of blood has made the storage and development of blood banks possible, and we know that Australia has quite a well-renowned blood bank. Despite these blood banks and the increase in people donating, there are still challenges which we face in terms of donated blood. There are still insufficient supplies to make sure that everybody who needs blood is able to receive blood. It still has a relatively short shelf life, despite being able to add some chemicals to it. And there are significant transportation issues as the blood samples need to be kept at a certain temperature and made sure that they're able to be transported to different parts of around the world. It's specifically important in war zones that need blood all the time, but are often in remote areas. There is current research still continuing, which will hopefully help to improve blood screening processes, and that's to ensure that there is no contamination of those blood sources, but also no infection of people receiving the blood. Also improving the quality of stored blood, and also helping to make sure that we're still increasing the shelf life available for blood. The Australian Red Cross Blood Service provides this important information to donors, and we can see here that they divide their blood products into three main categories: whole blood, plasma, and platelets. So the whole blood is the blood that's collected straight from the donor, but it can be separated in a lab, but it's not taken out at the donor service. It's often used to treat cancer, blood diseases, anemia, heart diseases, to replace blood that's lost during childbirth and operations and significant blood loss, and also to treat trauma and burns. The red cells can only be stored for 42 days when they are taken from the donor. If we look at plasma, that's that straw-coloured liquid which we'd covered previously. It contains special nutrients which can treat a different range of conditions compared to whole blood. This process, they collect the plasma from the donor and return the rest of the blood products by a process called apheresis. The plasma is often used for immune system conditions, muscle conditions, haemophilia, pregnancy, but also bleeding, shocks, burns, and for immunizations. I guess the benefit of plasma is that it can last up to 1 year when it is frozen. Platelets are the tiny plates in blood which can help with clotting and reduce bleeding. They are vital for people who have low platelet counts, especially cancer patients whose immune systems are quite deficient. In a similar process to plasma, they collect the platelets and return the rest of the blood products by apheresis. I guess the downside or disadvantage of platelet donation is that they only last for 5 days, but they are quite important for patients undergoing chemotherapy and bone marrow transplants. The products of donated blood can be broken into two categories: labile products, which are the perishable components that have a short shelf life, and they're the ones that we've discussed previously, so the red blood cells, the platelets, the plasma. But then we have the stable products, which have a much longer shelf life, but are only produced by separating or genetic manufacturing, and they're including our blood clotting factors and our immunoglobulins. Next, we move on to artificial blood, and I guess the first discovery or need for artificial blood was when transfused blood or that donated blood was undergoing issues as a spread of diseases and trying to find ways in which we can increase the shelf life rather than using the donated blood. And that was because they found out that these problems existed, and they started to research how can we make sure that we don't have to cross match blood types, so we always have a constant supply of blood regardless of the amount of people donating. Also, we know that they have a short storage life, but also the difficulty in transporting bloods to the places that desperately need it. To produce artificial blood has to have the following ideal characteristics. Um, It needs to be able to stored for long periods and easily transported. Needs to not be cross-matched. Needs to be able to be produced in large quantities and quite a low cost. It needs to be safe, so non-toxic and free from disease. We need to make sure that the artificial blood created does not trigger an immune response. And it also needs to be able to continue to circulate within the body even when a person has continued to produce their own blood. We can look at the following artificial blood substitutes, and these are currently broken down into 4 categories. We can see that there are quite a few substitutes that have been developed and trialled, uh, most of which are still not set for approval or for use in America or Australia currently. 2 of which have had a high level of research, are perfluorocarbons, and they can carry oxygen in a dissolved form, even in the absence of red blood cells. But the difficulty in that one is that they have not yet found a way of which to um, make it mix in the blood without separating. And the second are hemoglobin based oxygen carriers, which involves extracting hemoglobin from donated blood and modifying it. Um, the modifications that they have made to this type have still had a high affinity for oxygen, so they're not able to give up that oxygen readily to body tissues. So that's still in the research phase. Thank you for watching video 8. Tune in for video 9.